Savitri as a spiritual practice. Let me start this session with a tribute to Sri Aurobindo on his 141st birthday. Sri Aurobindo was an unprecedented figure in human history. Just look at his life. He went to England at the age of 7 and returned as a young man of 21. And he spent these 14 years with his remarkable intellect, understanding, assimilating, and having a critical look at the Western culture. And after returning here, realizing that he knew hardly anything about India and the Indian culture, he taught himself Sanskrit and went into the ancient Indian scriptures in their original. He spent 14 years doing that at Baroda, and having spent 14 years in the West, understanding, assimilating, and looking at the Western culture, and doing the same for 14 years in India, at the Indian culture, he became an unprecedented figure in human history. But then on top of that, he had a remarkable intellect, an excellent command over the language, and above all, a phenomenal spiritual capacity. And he seems to have received all these special opportunities and circumstances because he came with a special mission. His mission was to give to the world that word, that wisdom, which originated in India and which the world was going to need very soon. 100 years ago itself, he could see that the spiritually starved world that science and technology was giving way to was very soon going to get disillusioned with the developments in science and technology, and realizing that the problems of human existence cannot be solved by all the new inventions that we were making. It would once again turn to ancient wisdom. But then this ancient wisdom, the spiritual wisdom, was required in today's language in terms which today's man can understand. And this is what he ended up doing. And if one were to sum up his spiritual philosophy, which has great relevance to today's world, it is that he gave a highly life-affirming brand of spirituality to the world. The type of spirituality that we can bring into our daily lives to make our lives happier, healthier, and more meaningful. His philosophy was not just philosophy. The mother demonstrated in Pondicherry, in the Pondicherry ashram, that this philosophy can in fact be put into practice. And of course, while Sri Aurobindo and the mother were around, if any questions arose in the process of putting this philosophy into practice, they were there to answer it. Even after Sri Aurobindo went into seclusion, he continued to welcome letters, and he replied to these letters in painstaking detail, and that's how we have 3 volumes of letters on yoga today. And the mother, of course, was always available to answer all questions, big and small, wise and silly, with infinite patience. But now that they have both left the body, whom can we turn to? In other words, where is the guru to whom we can turn today? Because we can still have problems, difficulties, and questions for which we would like to have answers. Sri Aurobindo said that the guru, in fact, has 3 types of roles that he can play. One is through the word, that is, his teachings, which in fact is the least important. The second, he said, is example, the example that he sets before the disciples. That is more important than the word. And the third is his influence. That is a subtle influence that he radiates just by his mere presence. Now, the word of the guru is always available in the books that he might have written or which his disciples might have written. Example is also available because the life history of the guru is there before us. And the highly spiritually evolved beings, spiritually realized beings, continue to radiate their influence even after they have left the body. And therefore, Sri Aurobindo said that a living guru, in fact, is not necessary. But we find that Sri Aurobindo has, in fact, left behind a scripture that can work as a guru, which has all the three elements of the guru in it, and that is Savitri. Savitri has his teachings, the word is there, and then Savitri has the example. It has his yoga and the mother's yoga both. So we have the example in front of us as to how they practiced their yoga. And the influence again is throughout Savitri, because Savitri was not written from an ordinary level of consciousness. It was hardly composed like a poem. It is something that was revealed to him when he was at the peak of his spiritual realization. And therefore, Savitri is a scripture that can act as a guru, and that is why the devotees of Sri Aurobindo treat it as a scripture, and some read it mechanically, even if it is looks like mechanical, but they read it every day. And all the devotees, even those who don't read it as a practice every day, read it at least on special occasions. Now let's try and see how Savitri has acquired that status and how it fulfills the needs that we try to fulfill from a scripture. The first expectation that we have from a scripture is that it will reveal to us the deeper truths of existence. It will answer questions such as how the universe was created. Was there a creator, or was the creation of the universe an accident? And having created the universe, if there was a creator, what role is it playing in running the universe today? Does it still continue to play an active role, or has it abandoned us and left us to our own devices? What is the relationship between individuals and the rest of the creation? What is the purpose of human life at all? Now, these are the types of deep existential questions to which we expect answers from a scripture. And we find that, in fact, Savitri has all these, and based on Sri Aurobindo's personal spiritual experiences. For example, on the creation of the universe, we of course have all this at several places, but I'll just take a few lines from one place where this comes up on page 266. The all-containing was contained in form, oneness was carved into units measurable. And this goes on further, but and this itself sort of gives in a nutshell the process of creation. The all-containing was contained in form. The whole process started with the divine that is infinite, cannot be confined in terms of time and space. And since it cannot be confined to space, it had an all-pervasive presence, no boundaries, it could contain everything, and yet in the process of creation, it ended up having a form in which it was contained. So this was an act of self-limitation, gross self-limitation on the part of the infinite. The all-containing was contained in form, oneness was carved into units measurable, the limitless built into a cosmic sum. So the one that could not be limited added up to a finite sum, the cosmic sum, and then it goes on indivisible time into small minutes cut and so on. Indivisible time into small minutes cut. So the one that could not be confined to time, that it was eternity itself, chose to cut itself into minutes in terms of units of time and so on. So this is a beautiful description of the process of creation coming straight from his experience in words which have a mantric quality. Now, besides the deeper truths of existence, what else do we expect from a scripture? We expect that it should be able to solve our problems, or at least give us some solace when we are going through a difficult phase in life. The mother has said that when you are depressed, miserable, just pick up Savitri, concentrate for a moment, and open it at any page. And you'll find that your misery will be gone, and you'll find solutions to your problems. There are several places where we find this type of solace visible in words. And I'll just take a few examples again. For example, on page 11, an absolute supernal darkness falls on man sometimes when he draws near to God. Now, here there is an implication of difficulties, an implication of the dark periods of life that in fact makes those dark phases of life look like a blessing. When we are moving closer to God, when our life is taking or is about to take a turn that will unite us with the divine, that is exactly the time when we start experiencing all types of difficulties, failures, and problems. What else do we look for from a scripture? If a person has decided to live a spiritual life, wants to engage in sadhana, he wants to look at the scripture for guidance. And once again, the mother has assured that Savitri has all the material to take us right up to the highest levels of consciousness. And if one reads it carefully, one will have a feeling as if the Guru is leading us by the hand and taking us on the right path. Now, fate, which can sometimes be very cruel, is in fact something that initiates us, that awakens in us that sleeping urge to move to the divine. And here we have a beautiful description of initiation by fate. His paths are found for him by silent fate. Fate seems to be silent, but yet it speaks. It speaks to us and it shows us the path. His paths are found for him by silent fate. As stations in the age's weltering flood, firm lands appear that tempt and stay a while, then new horizons lure the mind's advance. So as we are moving through the uncharted course that life has, we are in a flood sometimes, and sometimes firm lands appear that tempt and stay a while. Now, what are these firm lands and that tempt and stay a while? Worldly success, family, relationships. Now, these are like firm lands that appear in the course of life, tempt and stay a while, but then fate makes sure that new horizons lure the mind's advance. So this process continues, and a few lines later, an unattained perfection calls to him, because that unattained perfection, the perfection to unite with the divine, that continues to call the man, and that's why this keeps happening. An unattained perfection calls to him from distant boundaries in the unseen. A long beginning only has been made. So this awakening, this initiation is the beginning of a long journey, but at the same time this awakening is important. In Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's integral yoga, there are three pillars of sadhana: aspiration, rejection, and surrender. An aspiration that is steady, intense, sincere, perseverant, but not impatient. And then rejection of all those movements that come in way of moving towards the aspiration, moving towards the goal. And surrender to the divine will and depending upon divine grace. Surrendering the results, the pace of progress to the divine. Now, these are the three main pillars of sadhana, and we find that there's plenty on each of these throughout Savitri. Now, here are a few lines from the Mother. It does not matter if you do not understand it. It, in Savitri. It does not matter if you do not understand it, but read it always. You will see that every time you read it, there will be something new revealed to you. Each time you will find something new. Each time a new experience. But you must not read it as you read other books or newspapers. You must read it with an empty head, a blank and vacant head, without there being any other thought there. You must concentrate much, remain empty, calm and open. Then the words, rhythms and vibrations will penetrate directly through the printed page, will put their stamp upon the mind, will explain themselves without your making any effort.